A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We warmly welcome all of you to Beyond the Bottom Line, the professional series bringing out marketers' perspective, organized by the Association of International Marketing Graduates in Sri Lanka, the AIMGSL. Now, as we all know, branding is critical to businesses. The brand keeps the liveliness and relevance as it continues to evolve its identity. And of course, it is the identity of a company that sets it apart from the competition and leaves a memorable impression. There's also no doubt that the digital marketing landscape is transforming the marketer's role and marketing itself at an incredible pace. And marketers are now realizing that getting the right message to the right audience at the right time is the most crucial way to cut through all the competition, and contextual content plays a vital role here. So today, for a panel discussion, we have with us a group of eminent personalities who have reached the pinnacle in their respective spheres in marketing to talk on the importance of branding, contextual content creation, and managing performance in a digital-first era. And before we commence the proceedings, we would like to appreciate the support of our sponsors in various capacities. We have SLT Mobitel as the official telecommunication partner, Sampath Bank coming on board as the official banking partner. And as the corporate partners, we have Montreal Consultants, Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, Appit, Maubima, Ceylon Today, Serendip, and Emerging Media. A big thank you goes out to our sponsors for making this event possible. And to formally welcome you all for today's event, I cordially invite the Secretary of the Association of International Marketing Graduates in Sri Lanka, Mr. Kanchana Karunagama.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Association of International Marketing Graduates of Sri Lanka, I cordially welcome each and every one of you for today's event. AIMG formed as a new venture, now getting into different spans and areas like professional development, well-being of the marketing fraternity, training, so on and so forth. So what we are experiencing today is one of its kind, a professional series, which is starting today and will continue from this year and onwards. So my duty is to welcome you. I know it's a busy day, but I really appreciate the fact that all of you are here. It's really good, full crowd. So thank you for your presence here. And let me very quickly and very sincerely thank and introduce and welcome our guest and keynote speaker and the panelist. We have with us Mr. Salia Vitana as our distinguished keynote speaker, representing founder CEO, Memento and Infection, followed by a panel discussion. For the panel discussion, we have Dr. Rohan Tatukorala, country head, Cluetrack Labs for Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Pakistan. Ms. Sajini Jayanthi, Head of Content in Cube. Mr. Charita Subasingha, President, Director Retail, John Keels. And Mr. Taraka Ranwala, Senior Deputy General Manager, Group Marketing, Deposit Mobilization, and Digitalization at Sampath Bank. So this panel will be moderated by Mr. Chamindra Kulamanage, co-founder, chief editor of HLN Media. So I believe it's going to be a pretty interesting evening, next 1 or 2 hours. So I earnestly request you to use the knowledge, experience of in this eminent panel and the keynote speaker and make it a very interactive session. We all have faced different issues these days beyond what we have expected. So this is the right time to get the share the experience and the knowledge of this eminent panel and this keynote speaker. So without taking much ado, let me hand over the stage to Kasuni to proceed with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karunagama. Ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Karunagama said, we now move on to the keynote speech. And let me take a moment to introduce our keynote speaker to you. He's an entrepreneur and a technology enthusiast operating in the marketing transformation space. He has been a part of the regional marketing fraternity for over 20 years and is quite passionate about technology, data, and creative aspects in the same. He's a visiting lecturer at the University of Plymouth, University of Moratuwa, and University of Colombo, and is a proponent of exploring new avenues such as Web 3.0, Metaverse, as well as MarTech. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, the founder and CEO of Momento and Infection, Mr. Salia Vitana.
Good evening, everyone. Really nice to see everybody and a full house, actually. First of all, I'd like to thank AIMG and the team behind it for organizing something like this. It's very timely and I think very useful for the marketing fraternity to meet like this. So a lot of people have been asking me, what do you mean by beyond the bottom line? So something that I was thinking about, especially during the situations that we are facing, we've been facing during the current few years. We as marketers are hell-bent on performance, which is something that as a digital outfit, my team goes through every day. And it's something that we tend to be quite passionate about. We've been pushed around for it. But in a nutshell, what is your bottom line? Your bottom line, obviously from an accountant standpoint, is your net profit. You have your, as an entrepreneur, I always go through my growth targets, my revenue targets, my middle of the funnel, how it works, talk about the funnel quite a lot. What's my value of the company in the next 8 years? Future valuations, all those things. But there is something that we all tend to kind of forgo in this whole craziness that is around. So I just want to leave you with a few numbers. If it comes up. Yep. So 95, 5, and 8%. Three interesting numbers. I'll explain what they mean. By the way, these numbers are all from LinkedIn, a survey that they've done recently. Mostly applicable to the B2B industry, but it happens in the business to consumer segment also. But there are few kings on and off, especially with the perishables, the FMCGs and all. But in a nutshell, only 95, so if you take 100% as your addressable or target base, 95% of your potential audience are not ready to buy. Only 5%, according to LinkedIn, are ready to buy. So what is this 8%? Apparently, so if you think about it, 5% is ready to buy or they are in market, whereas 95% are not ready to buy from you. That's the bigger chunk. But we invest only 8% of our budgets on this 95%. The balance, we invest in that 5%. So what does this say? This says that we are very focused on performance. All of us are fighting for a 5% share of the market. This is global, not just a Sri Lankan number. And most brands are culprits of this. How do you get to this 95% if they are not ready to buy from you? No matter what ad you put in, no matter what offer you give, no matter what competition you run, they are not going to buy from you right now, but they might buy at some point. But you need to be top of mind until they do that. That's where brand comes in. As a digital marketer, as a person who's seen both sides of the coin, before digital as well. Branding is something that most CMOs tend to do as a hygiene factor. We know a lifespan of a CMO is about 3 years, 4 years now, so they want to show their results, move on. That's happening all throughout. Certain clients of mine in Malaysia and Singapore, same story. Nobody wants to invest in their brand. So this session is not about how to do branding, because I think most of you can lecture me on that. But this is about the importance of that and how we can use data for that. There is a new concept called performance branding that's come into the picture. Performance marketing, like I said, is something that we've all been looking at. How do you improve your conversion rates? How do you look at the marketing funnel in a different sense? How do you actually predict how your marketing ROI is going to come? But then we tend to ignore the branding side of it. So that's where behavioral data plus technology can come in to clarify that 95%, what their journey is, and where will they be going. So that's where the behavioral data and intent comes in. I'll talk about that in a bit. In order to get there to a performance branding level, you need to think from a company out approach to a customer in approach. What do I mean by that? You need to have a brand that's quite meaningful. This brand meets people's needs and they feel emotionally connected to it. And also we need to be different. I'm sure there are lots of differentiation strategies that everybody's been brainstorming about, but it's perceived in the person's mind as a trendsetter, especially with the channels that you come across these days, from your TikToks to your Instagrams. Your millennials are on it, your Gen Zs are on it, your Gen Alphas are on it, you name it, everybody's on it. So how do you be a trendsetter and be remembered? And also, we have to be salient. When the need comes, people need to remember us. That's where the whole branding side comes in. So CX, or customer experience, is important. A lot of brands invest in that. No matter whatever you do, if your customer or potential customer doesn't, or you don't appeal to your potential customers, they're not going to convert. So CX is a very important part that we need to think about as we move along. Again, I'm touching on that 95% who are not ready to buy. Especially in the B2B marketing side, being in a couple of companies and then starting my own thing, what sometimes I see conversion rates or conversion lags of 12 to 14 months. And then we are like, okay, how do you shorten those cycles? How do you improve your marketing funnel? But we don't think of creating sales opportunities for the future. That's the importance of branding. Big companies like Salesforce, Nike, these guys invest a lot on their brand. It's been years and years of investment. If you remember the tagline, "Diamonds are forever," it's still being marketed by DBS, right, for 70, 80 years. So your brand needs to be mentioned at the right time to the right person, and then it has to be contextual, which I'll talk to you about in a bit. But the idea is to create future value in front of your potential customer's mind. Now, not a lot of you might know this, but Nokia used to be a paper company in the 1800s. And they transformed themselves into different areas. They ventured into mobile phones, as we all know it. One thing is clear, though. When your category dies, your brand is the only thing that can save you. And that's what Nokia did. So when the paper industry was dying, they went into mobile phones in the 90s. And then they obviously came to a certain point, and then for different reasons, they are no longer up there. But still, categories tend to die quite faster these days. But when the category diminishes, especially in the FMCG and those areas, a lot of categories die, but then the brand is what's being remembered. So that's important for us to keep in mind. Another thing that we need to realize is customer journeys are no longer linear. We talk about the marketing funnel inside out. The times that we talk about a funnel, every time if I saved £1, I'll be in a good place right now. But it's something that marketers feel comfortable with. It's something that the CFOs are happy with. But your customer journey is no longer linear. They don't just go on this whole discover, engage, explore and buy kind of thing. Think of yourselves, you don't ever buy like that, right? So the actual customer journey is the picture on the right. You might look at some YouTube videos, you might just go straight to a shop and buy something, you might refer something that a friend told you, you might look at reviews, you might go on Facebook, you name it. The customer journey is convoluted. So why are we measuring customer success through a funnel? Something to think about. There is something called the largest addressable qualified audience. This again is an idea that is stemming from performance branding. Remember that 95%, whilst that is your biggest audience, how do you actually cut it down and figure out where to brand? So there is a concept, so there is a Google evangelist called Avinash Kaushik, a guy that I really follow. So he's come up with a new model as opposed to the funnel called See, Think, Do, Care. C basically is to figure out your largest addressable qualified audience. If you are, for example, a camera brand, it could be people who just like to take pictures, right? And then your think audience. They are your largest audience, addressable audience, but with some commercial intent. So they might have a little need. They might not necessarily buy right now, but they might have a little need. Then your do audience. This is your addressable audience, but with a lot of commercial intent. These are the ones in that 5% who are going to buy from you. And then finally, the care, which is your existing customers. He refers to them as people who have done at least 2 transactions with you. So this is a model that kind of works well with the performance branding side of things. This is a real-life example of how Netflix used that. Again, the way we look at data, everybody talks about data. Data is the next goal. Data is this, data is that. But if your data is not actionable, and if the data doesn't convert into insights, it's pointless. So that's where I think contextual data and insights matter. So this is what Netflix did. This data is actually from the UK market. The blue column on the left is your total households in the UK. So say that's 100%. The 81% is the number of households who might be watching a subscription TV service at some point. And then your 79% is somebody out of that 81% who watches Netflix. And then your 61% is people who actually pay for the Netflix service. And then finally your 49% who are Netflix users who pay for your premium. Some of you would have noticed recently Netflix is sending this message, the one on top, that says, start your own Netflix for free today. So basically, Netflix figured out, so actually if you rewind this to 2019, what happened was they started marketing to this 100%. They were going berserk with Netflix ads to everybody saying, look, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. What they have realized now in 2021 or 2022 is that a lot of the 49% that you see here who are Netflix premium users are sharing their passwords with other people, which we also do, right? And they are in that 79%, which is people who watch Netflix, but they don't pay for it. Isn't that the easiest customer base to get into? They already know your product. They really like it. So that's why Netflix is putting these notices right now. So that's, again, a time where people can look at data very differently. This is slightly technical. I don't know whether you can see this, but people who know Google Analytics, this is one of the favorite reports of ours, the attribution report. So the see, think, do model that I talked to you about earlier, so in attribution, especially in the digital marketing world, which basically means there's a journey that a customer goes through, and at some point they will click, go and buy. So that last click is called last click attribution. And one before, say for example, you see a product being advertised on Facebook, and then you see something on a newsletter, you see a newspaper, you see a TV ad, but finally you click on some sort of ad or something and click and go to the online store and buy. That is your last click. Usually marketers just invest in that last click, ignoring all the assisted conversions that's happening. So in the see, think, do world, the assisted conversions are your see, think, and then the do is your last click. So again, this model is applicable to a lot of tools that we use right now as well. This is a little bit of a sour topic, but I'll try and go through it somehow. So predicting intent is something that we try to do. What is that 95% going to do in the next year? Right? This data, for example, if you search on Google on migration right now, there's a lot of things that people are searching for. Right? I saw somebody who is a migration consultant, is a sponsor as well. I'm sure this will be useful for you. Your long tail searches are about migrating to Canada, migrating to Australia, UK, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. But if you dissect that data a little bit, by the way, I got this data last night from the Google platform. You see about 100,000 searches happening in Sri Lanka right now for migration every month. So this 100,000 is not 100,000 unique people. It will be 100,000 devices, but most likely about 50, 60,000 people, maybe. Huge numbers, and it's going up. But if you dissect those numbers a little bit, there is a general search for migration, somebody who doesn't know what they want to do, but friends are saying migrate, migrate. There are people searching for Department of Immigration and Immigration, 2,900 searches every month. Those are people who might most likely want their passport to be sorted out, or they know the place. Qatar job, 720. Green card lottery, 4,400. DV lottery is also part of that, I believe. It's about 2,900. So the list goes on. And then people who really want to know which country they want to go to, migrate to UK, 110. So if I'm a brand or if I'm a company, I will dissect this data and I would figure out where I want to be in front of. I don't want to be in front of the person who searches for Department of Immigration and Immigration if my offering is maybe travel to the UK or migrate to the UK or something. So that's where data is important. And most of these searches are happening in the Western Province, followed by Central Province and so on. So you can actually really dissect this data, figure out this behavioral intent through this data, and market accordingly, and get your brand in front. The other side of the thing is, I think we need to be cognizant of the way we look at data. Again, it's a very popular line from some time ago, but I think that is how we look at data as well. Any marketing brief that you get these days, it's all about demographics, psychographics. If I look at a gentleman in the front row who is nicely suited, booted, he's got nice cufflinks, looking really good. Typical advertising would be looking at his outset or appearance, I should market a nice car to him. But inside, he might not want to drive. He might have an ethical mindset. He might want to have a cycle, for example. But the traditional mindset is all about demographics and psychographics. I think it's time that we moved on. And also measure intent through expressed behavior. There are lots of data points that you can get nowadays. There are loyalty schemes that you have your website, you have in-store data. All this can be combined to get a single source of truth. I know it's not easy when it comes to an enterprise, getting all the stakeholders on board, but I think it's time that we did because we have missed a few iterations of this as Sri Lankans. There is another aspect that we need to think of, which is content overload. Right now, Facebook users share nearly 2.5 million pieces of content. Twitter, they tweet about 300,000 times. YouTube users upload about 72 hours of new video content. And blog writers post about 1,400 new blog posts every minute. So that's a lot of content that's out there. We talk about content marketing, but what's the point of creating content if there is so much of content out there? I think that's where we need to really think how we can create contextual content that is hyper-targeted. What do I mean by that? So customization and being relevant. So I don't want any other random ad appearing in front of me. I'd like things to be customized for me because I am lazy. I would like to search for something. Back in the day, people never clicked on those ads, but now people want ads because they know it's customized. There is a set of people who want to block ads, which is also there, but the trend is people want things that are customized. And when there's tons and tons of content that's out there, I don't want to waste time looking at that. I want the right content for me. You can also think of doing content based on personas. Different personas behave differently online. How do you create different types of content for them? And then tapping into intent data. The very basic example I showed you about migration, that's data I got in like 2 minutes by myself. That's in front of you. You can use that. And that shows the intent of the consumer. Facebook is a little bit like a hoarding that you see outside. Maybe you'll do something about it, maybe you'll convert. But search data is intent. Somebody goes to search for something when they either want to get educated, they want to buy something, they're serious about something. And there is the influencers, which I'm not going to talk too much about. They're a channel, more or less, but they can create believability to your content, depending on the type of influencer you use. It can be a micro-influencer or a nano-influencer with the right message and the right channel. That might work as well. I'll quickly take you through a couple of case studies from what we've done in the recent past. So we work with Petronas in Malaysia quite a bit. As you may know, Petronas is a huge oil and gas company. And before the pandemic, Petronas had this thing called a bid round, where if you're Shell Gas or if you're BP, you come and bid for certain spaces in the sea where you can go and drill and get oil in a very, very simplistic way. This was a very personal event, face-to-face event, but come the pandemic, nobody could meet face-to-face. So how do you attract very high net worth individuals online and be in front of them? So that's where we used a bit of performance branding. We started looking at different personas. Who are these people? What are they doing online? Where are they hanging out online? And rather than giving them messages about the bid round, we started seeding that content from about 12 months before through different channels. And not just about Petronas. We actually talked about Malaysia, because if you think about the psyche of a person who's going to invest in oil and gas, and I'm saying this is about billions of dollars, they will send a whole team. And maybe few of those team members might end up living in that country. So that country is important before the actual offering. So we started talking about the country, why Malaysia is a really good place to live, and why is it good for your kids. Start talking about those things. Then from an investment standpoint, how can you get your returns? This is the data that you can use. So a lot of this content started going on LinkedIn, and then we also started analyzing the visitors who came to our site. Once we saw a spike from Bing. Bing, as you know, only has about 2 to 3% or maybe maximum 5% of global search share. Majority is obviously by Google, and then balance with the other channels. So if I'm purely looking at numbers or volume, Google is bringing me shed loads of traffic. Why do I need to worry about this 5% or less that's coming from Bing? When this campaign started, what we didn't know was that most of these enterprise clients, by default, have Bing as their search engine in their offices because of the agreements they have with Microsoft. And those were the people who were coming. So actually, end of the day, we figured out Bing traffic was converting at a much higher rate than Google traffic. So that's where I think looking at data in a very different sense, start challenging data, that's why it's important. And this was actually the best bid round for Petronas for the last 10 years. So again, it's how you look at data and how you kind of slice and dice it. I'll also quickly take you through a local example. We work with Rosell. As you know, Rosell is a bathware company. They've got tiles, they've got bathtubs, they've got taps, everything. Again, not a lot of Rosell's market is in market. Like I said, there is that 5% who are ready to buy, but there's 95% who are not ready to buy. So what do you do until then? You know, do you just run a brand ad? Do you just put some TV ads? Do you just put... Again, data comes in. So we started looking at the data that we had. We saw people who going to this platform called Pinterest. Again, when I say this, you'll be like, do Sri Lankans actually use Pinterest? Yes, they do. Especially this segment that Rosell was after. They were going to Pinterest to get inspired. We are naturally not leaders, we are followers, especially when it comes to ideas. So a lot of people go to Pinterest to see what their bathroom can be like, what their living room can be like. So this we saw as an opportunity to keep reminding people, cool, you can look at these things. By the way, at Rosell we have all this sorted for you kind of thing. And we managed to actually monetize Pinterest and convert Pinterest into a channel that brings in highly qualified traffic that buys from them. So again, this actually won a global award at the Drum Awards in the UK as well. And it's one of those moments where you realize looking at data and challenging the norms actually do help. So only a couple of more things. Any of my decks wouldn't be complete if I didn't talk about the metaverse. My team would say the same. Whilst we talk about performance branding, trying to live the moment, hit our targets, we also need to be cognizant of the future. The metaverse, I'm sure you would have heard about it. Don't forget, Meta is a name given or changed by Facebook. Facebook is now called Meta. Metaverse is something else. The metaverse is the 3D version of the internet, simply put. And it is where we are heading to. If you don't believe it, 2 days ago they had the first ever fashion show on the metaverse, which was a online representation of the actual physical fashion show. Nike is selling shoes for more than the physical shoe. Gucci is selling. A lot of people are getting trained. Amazon has training programs on the metaverse. Education bodies are selling on the metaverse. So it's happening right now. So we need to be aware of it. It's not a revolution as such. It's actually an evolution of the current version of the internet. And the way we deal with it will be very different. As you see in this video, haptics will play a major part. How we analyze data. Right now, if you're a digital marketer, you'll be looking at impressions, clicks, click-through rates, views, blah, blah, blah. But in the metaverse, the way you experience the metaverse will be very different. The way you touch and feel things. There might be massive opportunities for retail, where the holy grail of retailers, how do you give that offline experience online? With the metaverse, maybe it's possible. So these are things that we need to be aware of. And it's already happening, and our future generation is moving there. Sorry. So just want to leave something with you before I wind up. Success for us marketeers is this funnel. We've been using that for donkey's years, and it still will be used. But success, according to our customers, is very different. And there will be a lot of changes that will happen. There will be a lot of people who might say, metaverse bullshit. It's going to happen in about 20 years' time or whatever. But that's the same thing they said about the internet. This article, I'm sure you would have seen it going around in WhatsApp recently. This is from December 2000. it said internet may be just a passing fad as millions give up on it. But fast forward 22 years, and we are talking about, digital first, and then branding in the digital age and all those things. But now the metaverse is here. The rate at which things will change is going to be faster. So let's be ready for it. Let's not forget about our brand, because brand in a digital marketer's eyes is actually something that converts. When we look at data day in, day out, somebody searching for something very broad versus somebody searching for your brand, it's a very different path. And that's why whatever you do offline also helps online as well. So there is this convergence that we also look at. So that's about it. I'm really excited to actually see what the panelists have to say. And there are some really good faces here. So hopefully we can have a good chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Withana, for your valuable insights. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now the time for the panel discussion on the importance of branding, contextual content creation, and managing performance in a digital-first era. And our panelists for today's program are Ms. Sajini Janetti, Head of Content at Incube, Dr. Rohanta Atakorala, Country Head of Clue Track Labs for Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Pakistan, Mr. Charita Subasinghe, President, Director Retail, John Keel's Group, Mr. Taraka Ranvala, Senior Deputy General Manager, Group Marketing, Deposit Mobilization and Digitalization, Sampath Bank PLC, and the moderator for today's session is Mr. Shamindra Kulamanage, Co-founder and Chief Editor of Echelon Media. And also let me cordially invite Mr. Salia Withana to join the panel discussion as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the panelists and the moderator for today's session. Over to you, Mr. Shamindra.
Okay, while we settle down, great to see you. Hi, and warm welcome to the panel. I don't need to introduce them once again. I think our topic is vast, I suppose, depending on how you look at it. And the diversity of the panel is also equally impressive. So I'm looking forward to having a great conversation with these folks. Here's how we will do it, folks. We'd really love for you to also participate from the get-go. Let's not wait till half an hour, 45 minutes from now before we take a couple of questions from the audience. Let's open this out. I will ask each of the panelists to give us some opening remarks. Except for Salia, who's had a big say on the whole matter so far. Perhaps we'll start with Charita. And we'd really like to open this out, get your views if they're brief, but really get some of those questions in for the panel. Charita, may I ask you to go with opening remarks?
Shamindra, let me start with what Salia presented. I think he presented two elements. One thing was the branding aspect and the impact on a business, getting the branding right, and secondly was the data analytics part. If I'm to talk about the supermarkets, the Keel supermarket, which I'm responsible for, we did a brand changeover about 5 years ago. At that time, very honestly, before doing that, I had no confidence in this branding story. I thought it was a bit of a hocus pocus that Rohanta and the team of marketeers do to make themselves very important. I thought more than branding, it's a case of just trade. Just sell. Hardcore selling is what will give you the numbers, and branding was just another illusion. But that journey that we started literally understanding our customer. We walked into the houses, because a panel discussion will not tell you exactly what you actually do. They'll say something, but their actual behavior is totally different. So we didn't really believe in it. We literally walked into houses, in the kitchen, to see what was done in the kitchen. Some interesting insights came in. One thing was that irrespective of whether the house was that of a mansion or a ordinary house or a place, few things that we found was irrespective of the materialistic world that we live in, the lady of the house, whether it's the mother or the wife, still considered that her primary responsibility was to provide a wholesome meal for her family. And one thing that also came out was that the biggest tension point for her was, how do I provide it? Simply because of the lot of noises, starting from the overusing of pesticide to various stuff, sugar contents to various stuff. That was something that was a big tension point. That is one aspect of it. The other aspect was a business that we are in, retail business. We work with about 4,000 farmers, about 1,000 suppliers, 4,000 plus team members in our teams, spread across different communities. And there is a significant role that we had to play as well. So I just took a very small example of the house, but other aspect that we are able to influence in. And hence we thought the brand purpose that we are going to stand for was to improve the quality of life of the nation. Simply because it was going to be the most relevant thing for all the stakeholders that we are working with. That was the starting point of our brand journey. Then in addition to that, that was the core on which the entire branding started off, to improve the quality of life of the nation. Then we also identified a point of difference, and in that context for our brand, I mean, you can talk that people will look at service, freshness, to all that good stuff, but it's a very subjective thing. A hardcore customer of a competitor of ours might think they are that particular chain would be the most service-oriented, while a person who shops at Keels might think otherwise, to whatever. So in that context, the point of difference I understood was going to be innovation, that we are going to be innovation. And that was the base on which the brand built on. And from that point onwards, we looked at how do we live the brand, whether you call it the 5 portals, P's, or whatever that you call it, the product, price, promotion, to all that was lined up in order to deliver the brand purpose, the core purpose. And then came the nice covering of the greens and whatever that we finally brought into the place. So that today, looking in hindsight, I believe few things happened with that brought a lot of discipline in our ways of working. So it was beyond the brand and the consumer, but how do you handle the day-to-day operations that brought a lot of discipline? So the branding brings discipline in the ways of working. The brand purpose also, we found, becomes a North Star in a chaotic environment that we are living in today. 2 years ago, when the COVID hit us, KPIs to all that were off the shelf. I mean, you couldn't decide whether it was sales or whatever you are going behind. So, and it is no secret that we got hammered as Keels. I mean, we were the butt end of various jokes at that time with our online not coming through and all that. So, April, we all sat down to understand how do you take from this point on. And the core purpose came into play. We understood what were the biggest concerns of the different stakeholders, the customer, the team members, as well as the community. Main thing was health and safety for them. Secondly, disposable income was difficult, affordability came into whatever, and we we channeled our ways of working based on that. Then 6 months ago, when we did another deep state study, now the biggest issue is affordability. Then you charter your course, you move your business to be relevant to that period. Why? Our brand says something, and in that relevance. So in a very, very simple ways, now I'm a believer in this branding. And he only taught me in Sima classes or the hocus pocus, but now I believe him. And as a person who had implemented or been part of that, there is a huge benefit. And in terms of brand value, we were in the wilderness. Now we have moved into the 7th most valuable brand as well. So all that nicely fits in with exactly what Shalia said, Shamendra. That's how I will look at it.
Brilliant. Take it away, Rohanta. Hocus Pocus, we'll start there.
I thought I had come for the all-party conference. What we see now is that people are not wanting brands to talk to consumers. They want people to talk with them. That's what the insight is telling you. So, I mean, we work for an AI company, so we do this whole thing called listening to the consumer. So we use different techniques and then get the data in, and then it goes through machine learning, and then it gives you insights which, sometimes you don't pick up. We were doing a study for a hotel company, which I can't mention the name. Very interesting. When we asked what the brand drivers were of the company, they said, we are a hotel where you can see Bento the beach. The only place where you can see the beach from any room. Number 2, that's the only place where you can have a bath. And that was the 2 key brand drivers, and obviously it was unique. But then when you ran the listening study using AI in the European market, what came out was very different. Number 1, they were asking was, we want hygiene. And this is pre-pandemic. Because they are coming to a third world country, they are saying, is it safe? Second thing, what they asked was, is the food clean? So now, for us, food and cleanliness is generic. But to them, that is what they want. So if you're not going to listen to the consumer, and you are going to talk to them and advocate saying, come here, it's unique, from the room you can see the beach, you can have a bath, that's the only place where you can have a bath in Bento the beach. I mean, it doesn't work. And you wouldn't believe this. When we asked them, what will delight you? What they said was, very simply, it's the pool. The delight factor was the pool. Now, we forget this. We talk about being eco-friendly, and we are talking about being carbon neutral, and you try to position your brand crazy, and all what that consumer is asking is, just give me a pool. And when you walk into a hotel, you see all the foreigners are in a pool, but you just don't listen. You forget to listen, and you are so wrapped up, like what Charita was saying, in your brand promise and brand purpose and brand values, and you start driving when simply you're just having to only listen to what the consumer wants. So now what we see all over the world is this thing called AI. And what do they do in AI? They don't go and ask a consumer. It's fly on the wall research. So, it's like flies on the wall, and you're listening to the conversation, you pick up the data, and then it goes through different kinds of AI algorithms, and then you come out saying, what are your brand drivers, what are your category drivers, and what are your delight drivers. Simple. That's it. And once you know that, it's like what Charita was saying, you understand what the consumer is saying. I mean, I go back to my Dettol days, when my boss, Ravi, said, I want to double the volume of Dettol liquid. I said, Ravi, are you nuts? Here's my resignation. He said, believe me. And he said, go to the home, spend time in the home. And when we went there, we found out that, yes, today's kids don't use Dettol liquid anymore, because they need Dettol liquid in their hand, not on their knees, because they don't fall. And then we suddenly realized that when a father comes home, starting from holding the knob, going to the TV screen, picking up a kid's toy on the ground, all that are touch points of where the germ comes. And then we started having this campaign, a family that uses Dettol fall in less often, and actually the volumes tripled. So listening to the consumer is key. Over. Thanks.
Okay, so I really enjoyed Salia's session. I actually come from a background of design. I was very much fascinated with branding. That's what got me here. And in making content, I realized the importance of listening to consumer and then the funnels and how the funnel is not linear. So I'm really here because I'm very fascinated with the work that goes into this to create the content. And my learning so far has been, for example, like building on what he was saying, listening to the consumer, and then kind of going back to what Salia said in Google, how they have identified how consumer behaviors on digital. One of the ways that they search for things is to either they want to do something, they want to go somewhere, they want to buy something. So one thing that I have been kind of keeping my head on in creating content for brands is to make sure that the material that you do create connects to your consumers when they are looking for something. I think this kind of goes back to that 95% are not ready to buy, but rather doing something else. But in that, where do you find the connect to communicate to them your product or your service? Yeah, so, and the other thing is coming from branding. I think from a content perspective, this is kind of going to go back to what we usually do on like social media platforms. There's like a recipe, right? Like for a month, a brand is going to put out a certain number of content that comes from like marketing activities they have planned on, and it's a very rigid formula. One thing I've realized so far is that it's important to not lose the branding aspect, especially when you do the bottom of the funnel type communications, which is where we put a lot of our money in. I think branding is really important and cool. Yeah, if you're interested in, I'm sorry, if you're interested in kind of figuring out where your content connects to your consumer, I think that would be a really cool area to talk about.
Okay, hi everyone. It's nice to see a packed audience. We generally don't get to talk to packed audiences. Maybe Rohantha does, but not people like me. Listening to all of them, I think I thought I'll just start by saying I'm a little glad that I'm in the older generation marketer and not a brand manager now. Because I see some of the very young brand managers here, your life is seriously miserable when you listen to what Salia says. We had to contend with probably the consumer out there and then maybe one or two media and how to get the message across. Today, you have all this stuff. So I'm glad that I'm an older marketer and not being able to, well, or rather, not having to deal with it. I thought I'll just touch on a little bit on being a banker, how data is used in what we do, and the kind of brand philosophy that we try to articulate, taking few things of what Salia said too. See, I guess if you really look at a banking brand, I think it's very difficult for you to sort of create what you call that experience per se, because it's not something you go and pick it off the shelf. But I think what happened with this pandemic, and this is my version of how I see it, is that bankers were allowed in no uncertain terms to do things so that your brand could be experienced. And then show what you call the caring nature that you have in your brand. And I'll try to touch on a small example just to clear what I'm saying. Being a banking brand, we always try to give value to our customers. And we always try to live that experience what we want them to have. And that is what we want to, from a very mundane self, to create that communication through that. During the pandemic, one of the things that we faced was that we realized that we need to go beyond the services of what we give. And most of the banks, if not few bigger banks, tried various different things, and in our own ways, we gave solutions to the consumers. One of the things that Sampath Bank actually did, which was first for Southeast Asia, and we now realize that it is a first for probably the world as well, is that we introduced what we called the touchless cash withdrawal. All of you here who has a bank account, well, I presume everybody has, you need to, at some point in your day, you need to go and put in your ATM card and withdraw money. And when you were staying home during the pandemic, the guys used to come, and most of them didn't have the card transaction capability. So you need to have cash. So even after the lockdowns were taken off, people found it very scary to use the ATM, because that is where you get the germs first and foremost, right? So we introduced the concept where you eliminate your entire process of touching the ATM. You just walk into any of the Sampath ATMs, you just scan the QR code, you enter the money that you want to withdraw, and then you take out the money. So what we wanted to do with that is to bring that caring nature that we had in the brand into the forefront as an experience. Now what I wanted to share this story is not just to tell you 80% of the people here who are Sampath customers, I'm saying that because I have a HNB colleague here. I'm just kidding, I don't know how many, but it's not only for Sampath customers that we did this. We had the mechanism to open it out to all banking customers. Now I'm touching on the main theme of this series of Beyond the Bottom Line. The bankers, we are at a high-powered meeting when we were discussing this. The so-called bankers wanted a charge put in, right? Say, for example, Rohantha is a Sampath customer, you walk into the ATM, we get you clean, very safe, withdrawing the money. But we get Salia, and Salia is not a customer, and we tell you, you can also do it. We are allowing you, but we are going to charge you. But when I say marketing was very clear that we are not going to charge, right? And what we did was we said, the brand of Sampath which cares for people, we are opening it out to all customers. Use our ATMs, fill up your wallet. All you need to do is download VPay, create the wallet, transfer money from your whatever bank you are, go to a Sampath ATM, hand the QR code, take the money out. Now what I wanted to say there was the whole system of doing data analytics to find out how many people use the ATM, the market, the Sampath customers, and because of we have the Lanka Pay, we also have the data to see how many other customers are using the Sampath ATMs. We had all that data, but we went beyond the data, and then we created what you call the brand experience in a way that it resonated with the overall brand principle of what Sampath stood for. And I believe in a time like this where in the world, through research they have brought out that it is the caring nature of brands that people have embraced and are being tied up during this pandemic, even leaving out some of the other bigger brands. I think the approach that we took makes real sense. Finishing off, how many of you here who have been going to big supermarkets to buy our grocery, but during the pandemic, we had this nice-looking guy pushing a cart, coming with some fruits, bringing the fruits to your doorstep, or delivering it to your house. You ended up continuing to buy from that guy rather than going into the supermarket. Why? Because you realized that experience of what he gave was beyond what you got probably from the bigger brand of the supermarket, right? With all due respect. Right? So that's what I would like to touch on at the starting point. Understanding what your brand delivers, if it is experience what you want to deliver, you use your data, but then you take that call looking at the real content from a delivery point of view. And that's what I wanted to touch on.
So that's a brilliant foundation to have a conversation around. We've got a couple of brand custodians here, practitioners, marketers, and all of you folks. I'm sure most of you, all of you, are also working with brands. So before we get deep into this, I can see like at least 6 or 7 seats up here. Anybody from the back? This is going to be a long evening. I'm sure you'd like to walk up. Just walk down straight here. There's 6 seats here at least. Take them. So at least two people are going to claim them. Right. Let's get into a discussion. And like I said, we'd really like to throw it open to the floor too. So if you do have a question that you'd like to pose to anybody on the panel, just put your hand up. If anybody wants to go for a first question, now is also a good time. We do have a couple of mics that we can send around. Okay, let's start this out, and Tarka, let me pick up from where you left off in your conversation. I mean, the last couple of years have been challenging ones for businesses and brands in particular, right? Ideally, I suppose a great brand has a value-based foundation. You've got a set of core values, you've got a core purpose like the one Charita was talking about, right? Did you find in the last couple of years that you found yourself questioning those values? Did you were the conditions so difficult that you had to think about adopting new ones, letting go of others? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, well, I could. You're putting me on a bit of a hot seat, but I'll try to diplomatically answer to you. You're right? As a brand, I think during this pandemic, more so than ever before, we realize that the values that we have built the brand on came into question in no uncertain terms, right? But being a bank, we have issues. I'll try to articulate in this way. As a brand, we may have certain values that we want to portray out in the market which embraced by the consumers. But then we are also governed by a regulator. So sometimes what happens is that the regulatory governance don't allow you to do certain things which passionately and very, very lovingly embrace what the consumers want. Now I'll try to explain it. For example, the regulator may put a cap on a certain product. For example, we say on the credit cards, they place a cap on the interest that you can charge. That particular cap is equivalent to the cost of the bank for running that operation. So basically, you are allowed to charge from the customer nothing more than the cost, and that is you're leaving out your human resource cost and ancillary costs out, which means you have to run that business at a loss. Now as a brand, and sorry, forget the brand, as a company, we need to now cover it up in some way. So it has to be covered within what we do, and sometimes that covering up might be from a brand and a brand custodian perspective may not be really clicking into the hearts and souls of what we want to do. Now that came into question during the pandemic to, I would say, to a greater degree. But then, if you really look at brands like us and the bigger brands that are there in banking, we all managed it, I guess, with very different things that we used to do. Maybe during the discussion I will try to give you some examples of that. But to answer to you direct, yes, it came into question. And I think the challenge is the marketers to identify that, but blend it within the framework that you need to operate and then bring it out into the experience of the consumer.
Charita, same question.
Yeah.
Did you find your fundamental brand values being questioned? Did you have to relook at those during the crisis?
I will take it this way. Now, there are 4 values that we work on. That is integrity, excellence, innovation, and caring are the 4 values that we work in. What we so was that depending on the need, we had to focus more on certain values during a period. Let me put it that way. Let's say with the pandemic hitting, integrity was something that we had to work because, it was not the right thing for us to have overcharged or, something like that. So integrity, when you're pushed to the wall, where, that integrity, that ensuring that you're doing the right thing comes into play, and caring also. So we found that while excellence and innovation are also part of your armory, those possibly takes a back seat, but you start playing more on the more relevant. So that's how I would answer it. So we didn't have to, reinvent new values, but it's how you played it as well, depending on the situation.
Great, super answers. So two different perspectives or two different challenges, and the way you confronted it. Any questions from the floor? This is your time. I'm going to put people on the spot. I think, come on, guys. There's a full house. This is a fantastic panel you have here. Okay. Rohanta, let me ask you something, right? We're talking about beyond the bottom line, right? It can be a vast topic. Salia went deep into one area of it. I mean, I think the data aspect of it, right? But you have a lot of experience with brands from the time you were doing Dettol to now, right? What do you think, if you take a big picture view, if you really step back right now, what do you think brands, generally speaking, in today's climate, in the challenging climate Sri Lanka is in today, really need to start focusing on? Is it data? Is it is it focusing deeply on that fundamental purpose that Charita was talking about? Is it trying to sort of understand your customer deeply through data, or just visiting households, etc.? Step back and think. What do you think are the biggest challenges brands face? I'm putting this to you because you've been dealing with brands for a long time.
Thanks. See, I think what's coming out is clear. The pandemic got a consumer to ask what their purpose is. And one research came out from Cantor was that brands with a purpose was picked up by a consumer. So, people started moving back to applying oil on their face, rather than applying creams. They went to more traditional ways in making them look good. So they started asking themselves, what is life all about? What are the brands I buy? And how do I relate to them? So one key thing, if I'm to pick up, is you have to get your brand, stick to its purpose, and don't move out of that purpose. I mean, best example, again, I don't want to quote brands that I work on. I'm going to quote a brand which is outside where I work on, is Lifebuoy. I mean, Lifebuoy just focused only on germ protection. And that's all they did. And that purpose came out so good. And when I was talking to chairperson of Unilever, Haja Al-Fafi, Haja said, brand say, brand do. What we say is what we do. So what's important now is make sure that what you say can be delivered. Especially in a situation today where everybody is lying. I mean, they keep saying, you're not going to have a power cut after 5th, and the next very minute you have a power cut for 10 hours, you know what I'm saying? So we have lost our total purpose globally. I mean, people don't know this. I mean, since I've been chairman of Export Development Board, and I've also been chairman of Sri Lanka Tourism, I have global contacts, and the guys are calling and asking, where are you? I mean, the first question they ask is, where are you? So I asked them, why do you say that? They said, your brand has been killed. So it's not this, what containers you can't pick up from the port, or, the the people that you see on the road, that is not the issue right now. It is what has this brand got into in a context. And Simon Arnold, the guy who is the nation branding guru, I mean, he called me and he asked, Wanda, what's happening to your brand? Why don't you guys who know these people put some sense that this is nothing to do with food and, you're killing this brand, So my view, simple, brand say, brand do.
Right, I'll come with the same question to both Salia and Sajini, right? And let me also spin this, right? Lots of brands appear to be, bolting on sustainability as part of this focus. It seems to be a trendy thing. You bolt on sustainability, and somehow that is going to give you purpose. I'm just asking you to also address that. Are you seeing too much of that? Is this sincere? While you address the question I put to Rohantha, which is, from a big picture point of view, what do you think brands are challenged with?
Yeah, so one thing I think is you shouldn't be giving empty promises. There's a lot of those things happening right now. You take Women's Day that happened recently, everybody wants a piece of it. It's just become something, a piece of it. We as a small organization, for example, 60% of our leadership is actually female led. And then, we don't think like that because most brands just want to make a buck out of it. They are very short-term, profit-oriented. If you look at it from a global perspective, Black Lives Matter was a huge, thing that was going on. But how many black faces do you see in a boardroom, right? So it's about what you believe in and actually live it. Like Rohantha said, just do it, just live it. That's what you should be. Again, sustainability is a topic that's quite butchered. There are awards people go for, they think the award is what sustainability means. But I think it depends on who you stand for, what you stand for. I was actually privileged to work with Charita and the team on certain initiatives during the pandemic. The Keels team were very open about things. They said, look, we did get things wrong. For example, everybody else was talking about frontliners, but if you look at Keels or any other brand, they have frontliners also who have not gone home, who have not seen their parents. They are frontliners too. They are actually serving the nation. So the brand actually, whilst looking at the consumer, also looked inwards. And as an employer brand, you come out very strong that way. So these are things I think as brands we tend to forget, and we tend to become glory hunters using certain nuances. So hopefully that won't happen.
Yeah, so I'd like to add to that. That example on Lifebuoy I found was really interesting. This is not a local example, but during the pandemic, Dove did a campaign saying, wash your hands, right? And so they are a beauty soap, but the campaign said it doesn't matter which soap you use, as long as you wash your hands. So this kind of goes back to not sticking to what your brand value is, right? It's just trying to make a buck out of everybody needs to buy soap right now in the pandemic. Even Dove is fine. But just in contrast to that, a couple of months later, they did another campaign that was in line with their brand, which is True Beauty, where they put in front line images of like female doctors and like nurses, like women out there doing service to protect the country, and how much pain they have to go through because of all the masks and the suits that they have to wear. They take that off, your face looks butchered, right? And it's interesting because even Women's Day and other like hallmark events that we find where like a lot of brands want to jump into to make a buck is very transparent to your consumers. You look at that Dove ad and say, oh, wash your hands with Dove. Seems like a not appropriate thing to say at the time. So I think it's very interesting how the message you want to put out during a certain time, that whether it is going back to your value or not, is actually very apparent in execution to consumer. I thought that was really interesting, something that came up to my mind talking about it. Yeah.
I just have one thing. See, I've been sitting on these WIM World Bank Awards for the last like 10 years. And if I give you insight about women, if you take any company, if you take any successful initiative, there is always a woman behind. It's an insight. And whenever you ask, look at the people who have applied, these guys never come up. Never. So, even though you appoint judges, their job is to find who was behind. And then sometimes when you go and tell them, can you apply? They say, no, we don't want to. That's for him to apply. So they always put the gent in front, so you'll have all the gents getting awards. So one insight which we get now, behind the lines of a brand like that, is that women in Sri Lanka are very submissive. They don't want to be seen and heard. So if you look at the success of that brand, the Vim brand, is about they search and pull that out. And that's what makes it credible.
Okay, so the ladies can prove Rohantha wrong here. Women in Sri Lanka don't want to be heard. Please put your hand up for a question
Not
to
now,
the panel.
now of course. I mean, now you have all the women on the road. Huh?
Okay, yes, sincerely. We want a question, and I'll come to Tarak. Go ahead, Tarak, and then we'll look for a question. No, there isn't a question. I'm hoping one of the ladies will start.
I just wanted to touch on since we discussed about sustainability. I think sustainability, I think it was said very clearly, sustainability is a very abusive word when it comes with branding. But I think sustainability, to work well with a brand, it has to connect well, right? I think it goes without saying. Today what we see is that you do sustainability for the sake of sustainability. You don't have any brand association. I'll give you a small example for that again from my organization. Sampath has actually we have about 4 sustainability pillars, but the 2 main ones what we have, the first one is called entrepreneur development. Now, any one of you in the panel and in the audience will see there is a very clear connect between banking and entrepreneur development, right? So, it's very clear, right? And the second most strongest, to me on a personal note, it's the most strongest, but the second most strongest pillar on our sustainability is restoration of tanks. Now, I love to look at Rohantha's face and say, restoration of tanks and banks? I guess you asked the same question, right? That's where the branding and the connect comes into play. What we do in restoration of tanks is that we identify tanks which are in areas which supports minimum of 40 to 50 acres of cultivation, which supports minimum of 100 families, right? And then we restore those tanks, and the restoration process starts with the irrigation department and the farmer community. The entire restoration is done by the farmers. Now again you will still ask question, great, but what's a banking brand got to do with it, right? The entire farmer community, when they start this project, they need to get into what we called working and getting the tank restored, but at the same time, the payment that comes in for them working to get the tank restored goes into a banking account. And there, again, it's not a Sampath Bank banking account. It's a banking account. What we do is that we get them into financial inclusion, starting point. The tank gets restored, the water comes in, and then now they have a tank, which allows them to do agriculture and various things. We then educate them in the process of getting their family life sorted out and planned for the future. The family gets personal savings accounts, the children are encouraged to open children's savings account. Again, banking accounts, not Sampath banking accounts. The end of the process is you have a tank, allows them to do irrigation, they are self-sufficient, and they automatically become bankable population. I'm glad to say we have even taken some of the competitor bank friends to educate them. But they end up opening accounts with Sampath Bank simply because in their own terms, අපිට මුකුත් නැති වෙලාවේ වැව හැදුවේ බැංකුවේ. We give it back to you. This is not my words, it is what they say at end of every single tank restoration.
What you said is spot on. I remember I was working on a herbal brand at one time. And what they do is, they go and sponsor all the Poya Day events in a Pansala. So one day I walk up to this guy and said, "Oh, bloody nut, man. You thought consumers are going to buy brands, you go and spend time with the consumer. Ask what the consumer wants. Let's do an equity study." And actually we did an equity study. And we showed how the parameters of the brand is to work on that. Something I couldn't understand. Because in the template that we have been taught in multinationals, you don't get into religion. You don't. It's a way. Okay? But something that I learned was that in Sri Lanka, you get in to the temple. You build your brand through the temple. That brand is a winner. It's something it doesn't resonate from a ideal branding kind of.
You see, I agree with you. On a lighter note, to my branding team, most of the time I say, "Vavai dagabai gamai pansalai bankuai." Right? So that's what we actually build. But then the personal satisfaction you get by seeing how their lives change, right, is phenomenal, right? In fact, within this tank restoration, we actually do, if it is in the north central where you have the CKD, the kidney issues, we actually do the water purification also. Again, completely different to what some of the bigger brands do. We do the water purification, we get the water board, get the entire community to self-sustain. We do the installation, it is completely run by the society. Now, the society consists of 5 or 6 fathers. You sell the water 1 rupee or 5 rupee a liter, right? Everything goes into a banking account. And you know the beauty of it? We set up the plant, we inspect it every 3 months. Nobody needs to do anything. That money that goes into the bank account replaces the filters, replaces the things and all that. And I'm telling you, you give water to anybody who doesn't have water, either to farm or to drink, you have a long-lasting relationship for your brand. That is proven right throughout what we do. So, tank restoration and banks, if you had any doubts, this is what it is. And on the final note, we don't communicate it also to gain mileage in a bigger way. Because the whole idea is that you do it to the community carries it forward. So that's why you don't probably see a lot of communication around it, but since of late we have started on that because it helps us to find new tanks. In fact, we just got one in Mayangana where Vadda community and the local community both do their harvesting. So it helps us to go it. That is why we use communication. So I just wanted to touch on that to give you an insight about how the brands could connect on sustainability if you know the right way to move forward.
Chairman, can I just take a minute? See, we talked about sustainability. Sustainability is not away from the brand. It's not a different agenda. From the way I see, from my experience, if you have very purposefully identified what your brand stands for in the consumer's mind, and you just deliver, that becomes your purpose. And that is sustainable. So you don't have to go after sustainability. I mean, I got a chance of going and studying the brand Maldives tourism. I mean, I'm not a tourism expert, but when I was appointed, I first went and studied. I went to Thailand, I went to Malaysia, met up with those guys who are doing better than us and understood. You know, we look at a Maldivian on the road and we laugh, no? Long yard, in a pair of slippers. But the brand, the work they do in building brands, we should be shy. They have studied the architecture of a brand, they do, every year they spend almost 2% of their revenue on research and development. And understand in every single market, why do people come to Maldives? Now, I mean, when I look at Maldives, I'll say, okay, you come because of the sea. But when you went and do, I mean, when the company that I work for, we went and understood why people are coming, and we looked at brand listening, the only reason why they come is because of tranquility. So the real reason you go to Maldives is for tranquility. You know, you go to the beach and you look, I mean, the sea is so calm. You know, you see the gap between the sea and the skyline. You know, so the real need, inside need is tranquility. But they have understood it. The Maldivians have understood and they have built the brand on it. Sri Lankan guys, we all come, we are all bloody brand experts. You have every single brand expert who have become a chairman of Sri Lanka tourism, and where is our brand?
Cool.
Shame on us, you know.
Deeply insightful. Questions? Yes. There's a question from a lady. Great. Can we get a mic over there? Can you put your hand up, please, again?
I naturally have to disagree with Rohantha. And because we were told that we are like attention seekers, and this is really controversial that you are saying we are submissive. And like in Asian countries, actually, there is a submissive behavior, but I think that's mainly because women has not realized how capable they are. So once they realize, I think men will have to go home. I'm sorry. But, and I have two
Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions actually for Salia. Like you mentioned these numbers, Salia, but I'm actually coming from Dilmati. It's an FMCG brand. So do you think these numbers would vary in different products or in different brands? Like, or is it like a universal number?
Yeah, so good question. I think during my session also, what I mentioned was that is more applicable for B2B. But because I think certain segments of the market, demand is anyway there, you just have to live, you have to buy stuff, you have to eat stuff. You know, that anyway happens. But still, if you look at the, from a global level, budget allocations for certain branding initiatives versus day-to-day, bottom-of-the-funnel campaigns and, you know, your market activation type of stuff, it's still there, but it's not that 95-5-8. It can slightly differ.
Because we were taught actually like to retain a customer is less costly than, but then this is a new concept actually, like I also need to look into it, but thank you very much. And about metaverse, I mean, it's a very hot topic these days. So, but I feel like it's like isolating people further. So do you think moving forward, people would like to, you know, continue with the concept, like after the pandemic, people really wanted to go out, like they were stuck at homes and everything. But what do you think about that? Just some ideas.
Yeah, so I think the pandemic just supercharged certain behaviors. You know, that's what happened. But I think now we have the freedoms to go out and do certain things. I'll just give you an example from the movie world, right? If you ask some of the people here, they might say, I love Star Trek. You know, I have seen Ready Player One, you know, those kind of stuff. So especially the younger crowd might say that. We kind of fall in love with this whole dystopian world. We want to sometimes get into it, depending on our objectives. So I think we are getting lonelier by the minute. We are very individualistic. We are very selfish. Platforms are there, irrespective of what this behavior is. Platforms are just helping us to augment that behavior. But I think what's happening right now is, especially with the metaverse, it's just creating another way for us to showcase this behavior. And in order for the metaverse to be successful, for example, it has to be a little bit dirty as well. For example, Star Wars or Star Trek, if you watch, it's a dystopian world, but it's a little bit dirty, right? Ready Player One, for example, his personal life is crap. And he goes to the metaverse to have a good time. So it depends on where you come from. I don't think there is like a blanket answer, but it's certainly something that's already here.
If you don't mind, I would like to add to that. So last December, I brought Quest 2. I have over 230 hours of gameplay on VRChat. It's a community-driven it's not a game. People just talk there, which was not an experience we had during the pandemic. So did it like supercharge our behaviors in like seeking community? Certainly. But I would like to very much disagree that it makes you lonelier. If anything, you find more community in the metaverse.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Just a small comment. Outside this room, I think we are kind of undergoing an unprecedented crisis in the world. We are saying beyond the bottom line. I did walk in late. I apologize for that, but for the past 1 hour or so, except for maybe the example of Sampath Bank, I honestly didn't see any empathy from the brand leaders who are in this forum reflecting on it or kind of saying what they are doing about it.
Are you referring to the current crisis?
Yes.
Okay, right. Anybody wants to comment?
Can I
Yeah,
just,
go ahead.
Sanjika, I think beyond the bottom line is the professional series. Within the professional series, we are actually talking about importance of branding, contextual content creation and managing performance. On within that, I think that is why maybe we didn't want to take that into the forefront. But and on a lighter note, other than Rohant, I don't know whether anyone else wants to actually talk about it and sort of create a further discussion where we will go on until about 1 o'clock in the morning.
We are going into another crisis.
See,
Yes.
Sanjika,
Yeah,
let
it's
me
certainly worth
just, I'll
talking
do a
about.
quick one.
Yeah.
See, guys, I headed the Economic Council for about 3-4 years, so, this crisis is not a crisis. Let's be very clear. What do we have to pay? We have to pay about 4.5 billion. Okay, total we have to pay 17 billion. It's nothing for this country. Understood, except that our guys have not got their act together. If you take 5 islands, right, and you sell it for nuclear energy, you can get bloody $25 billion. If you take Quebec, it's all owned by the Chinese. You go to Sydney, it's owned by the Chinese. I don't know why you need to make such a huge hue and cry if somebody buys. So this discussion about the financial crisis is not a crisis. It's about poor leadership, guys. So I think our view should be, let's manage our business, make sure that we don't lose our customers from our customer base. If you take a piece of soap right now, people are moving away from lotions into basic soaps. The piece of soap is being used up to the petta. Right? So our challenge right now should be, how do we focus and make sure that we keep our customer base right? Number 2, make sure that we manage our costs, and then make sure that we don't have to retrench anybody. My focus in the organizations I run, that's it. I can't change the world, guys. Even 3 days back, I was asked to come as a chairman of EDB, right? But, I didn't. I said, I'm sorry, guys. You guys are not professional enough for us to come and get into a debate. So we should just stick to our own domain and do our job.
Okay, so we have on one hand a leadership crisis in the country. There's nothing this panel can do to address that, right? But you have to run your brands, okay? Yeah. You have to run your brands in this over the next 3 years, and these years are possibly going to be unprecedented versus anything we've seen in the past, right? Let's try to shift gear a bit, right? Let's do a quick survey. How many of you have used a smartphone, your smartphone, for a transaction? It can be a banking transaction, purchasing something. Can we have a show of hands? A smartphone. How many? Okay. Right? Our brands in Sri Lanka, is their purpose, is their ability to deliver to a customer ready for people who are willing or who have already interacted commercially on this device? Will you have to have brands that work on this and only this? How are we placed? Anybody wants to, I'm just shifting gears. This is the future. If your brand doesn't work here, if you can't deliver the purpose here, Sali, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll actually go beyond this also. I think this is old right now. Whilst in Sri Lanka, this is new. This is old. This doesn't do a lot of things that we want it to do in the future. The phone as we know it will change. However, let me scale back to Sri Lanka. Brands should be device agnostic, should be customer focused. Wherever your customer is, whatever the customer needs, I think we should have a device agnostic policy. But obviously, looking at from a customer experience point of view, how do you want the customer to experience things? I think like Targa mentioned for Sampath Bank, they had the touchless system going on, which is good. You know, there is certain levels of customer centricness there. But again, I think looking at from a channel perspective, there are most of the customers, including the so-called late bloomers or the Gen Zs and the millennials, most of them are now going on different channels. For example, TikTok, right? It's most people's guilty pleasure, right? They'll go on TikTok, start looking at it. But TikTok, I don't know whether you know this, but it's one of the highest converting channels globally right now. Not purely, you know, it's not purely a dance channel. Back in the day, if you look at it, YouTube, we were waiting for 5 seconds to skip and go, but on TikTok, we are waiting for 30 seconds to watch the whole thing, right? So content consumption is changing, consumption patterns are changing. Brands need to be ready for this, they need to be on it. It's not a thing that it's not a nice to have anymore, it's a default. So I think the moment you have that digital first mentality and a customer focused mentality, I think you'll be in a good place.
Yeah, so TikTok is another one of those what's going on in that app for marketeers, right? Like we don't know how to approach it, we don't know how to make content for it, as in, not that we haven't seen what's happening internationally, but it's hard to fit that into our usual recipe, how we make content on social media. But I find it really interesting that it's now competing with YouTube when it comes to your time in consumers. And how many Sri Lankan bands do you find on TikTok doing a job that you find interesting? And this may be a little bit of an interesting example to bring up. Have you guys seen the Highland TikToks? Because they're really funny. And the brands are not doing it. Someone's doing it because it's relevant to what's going on in the country. I think it's a platform that we need to start looking at. And not maybe stick to our usual recipes in slicing life. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any questions from out there? Right. Anybody?
See guys, I mean, I run an education brand in one of my portfolios. Everything is only on the mobile. Everything. I mean, you advertise on the mobile, they ask, the total funnel of the consumer is on the mobile. They will put a message, you got to respond. Even if you call them, they don't answer. The kid of today doesn't answer. They say, can you send me a WhatsApp? And then they say, okay, direct me to the website. On their own, they go to the website. And then even if you go into telling them, can you come and register? They don't come to register. It's all online. It's a huge challenge. Huh? And then when they want to start, they say, no, we will listen to you online. You know? And then after they come in, they said, why can't we do exams also online? I mean, we are not, I mean, there are days that I have not seen some people. Now, how do you run a brand? I mean, if you don't meet a person and talk, and it's all about how you get somebody to change their behavior. I mean, that's what education is all about. Even without meeting, how do you change somebody's behavior? But then that's what the world has come to. Maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe sometimes when they are listening to you, they might be naked somewhere, you know, walking around in the toilet or someplace, you know, and you are shouting, trying to tell them something which, you know, they are in their pajamas doing some work, and you can't get them to the classroom now, finished. So but the answer to your question, sir, It's all on the mobile. And now, of course, the 10-hour power cut. You're anyway on the mobile.
No, actually, there's a problem in that. When you have the 10-hour power cut, I think about, I'm not sure, somebody from Movitel is here might say, I think after about 4.5 to 5, immediately 3G goes down, and your tower strength goes down, I think, after 5 hours, right? So the 10-hour means your mobility. I may be wrong, I'm just saying, looking at some of the information that we derived for our card information and stuff. Taking on what you said, and I agree with both Salia and this young lady which spoke about something very interesting and relates to her question. Now her question I wanted to answer when you all gave that fantastic answers. She had a philosophical part to her question. She was asking, how do you think that this gaming and all these things are moving people away from being connected together or being together, right? My answer to that is this generation of now, the new X and Ys and Zs, completely don't want to interact. If you don't believe me, look at some new Korean ads which are targeted to Gen X and Zs. In the ads, if you find like our commercials where we used to have a lot of people together, enjoying, running and things like that, that means that brand is not doing really well. You look at those ads and see, it's all in isolation because you're self-centered. You have a nice looking guy or a girl looking guy or whatever. In Korea, you walk, you do certain things, you carry the message across, right? But in a completely different kind of a setup that you and I, when I say you and I, not this younger generation, this older generation like us, who are used to, right? That is because philosophically, this generation has a different thinking. And what I'm trying to say is that as a brand, and you're catering to them, that is what they were trying to say, you need to plug it there. And then you need to be there, be visible, right? And lastly, what I want to say is that you asked about the data, how it is. Again, an old marketer saying this. We do a lot of data analytics. We use it excessively for our card stuff and all that. But once it's derived and comes out, the gut feel of these old marketers or what we have also come into play. And my recommendation is look at the data, but go with that gut of what you know also. Because as marketers, very important, sometimes what the data says may not be exactly what it is. So your gut will do that brand relationship to a certain degree also.
See, if I may just add something. See guys, Tarak was talking about the old brand model and the new brand model. See guys, to be very honest with you, to run a new brand model, you have to have a continuous learning mind. There is no chance in hell. Because, I just worked a number out, right? If you take the Sunday Times, if you take the education sector, they have 16 pages, all full. I just checked with the media agency how much they spend. The normal budget this year will cross more than 4 billion advertising. So if you say you're going to put about a 3% on advertising, it means that market is worth 100 billion, the education market. And if you do a research and ask how many of you guys came because of Sunday Times ad, not even one person. So it's only that you get a good feel by putting an ad there. And so the touch points of a consumer is totally different. So unless you know that model and you use that old model of putting advertising, TV advertising and seeing whether you can get a consumer, you are done.
Charitha, can I bring you in? I mean, your next wave of consumers will be Sajini's wave, and what's the game you're playing, Sajini? Sorry, what?
VR chat.
Okay. I still didn't catch it, but anyway, hope right.
So it's, I'm sorry, I'll clarify. So VR is for virtual reality, chat is chatting. So it's a 3D chat. Yeah.
Virtual reality chat. Sorry, we are all dated here. But you have to, in your first wave, when you're finding your purpose, you physically walked into people's, kitchens to figure what was important. But this is going to be a whole different challenge for you, and I want Salia also to weigh in on this.
I'm sure Salia will be able to add a lot into this. A few things about this data also. I think in that context, and also the complexity of the new brand manager's role to all that. I think data will play a significant role. If you look at the conventional or in a boardroom today, and the normal conversation between a CFO and a CMO conversation. The CMO wants a billion rupee advertisement and says he wants, and the CFO says, do you need that much? How do you know that that is driving? That's it. You know, Taraka, that is the normal fight in a boardroom. Yeah. So that the unfortunate thing today, as Rohanta said, is that you feel good sometimes that you put a paper ad, run a advertisement, 30-second advertisements to whatever. But the conversation today is that out of which, what is the most effective? And unfortunately, data plays a role. And then moving into the area of digital media. In that context, there's more accountability because you know who has seen. I mean, if you could remember Salia's slide on the number of eyeballs to whatever, how many people see, the accountability to all that, that effectiveness of what you spend can also be monitored in that context. So data in that context is an important thing a good brand head would need to have. Then going back to what you mentioned about how do you keep abreast of the stuff. The world is changing. And I was listening to all the good stuff that was asked. One thing is that as a brand, that continuous change would need to happen. And as Rohanta mentioned about how the education system is becoming online to whatever. I mean, we saw that a need when we were managing our own, the retail academy, the Keels Retail Academy, and we moved into online platform. Now it's totally online platform because gone are the days that you can get any of these boys and girls to come and sit, look at somebody's presentation and go. It is now empowerment, where the person who's learning should be given the opportunity to learn at his convenience and in terms of controlling his destiny. Now it is a situation where, and that is that the new generation, and that is where it is heading. So in that context, normally you would have said you need to be studying for a year, and only after that will we review you. But it is not anymore. You give it to him, you empower him, when you are ready, you come and sit for your exam, and then you will be evaluated. That is the thing that we have set up inside in our academy for the boys and girls who are learning. Now that same principle would apply to the consumer as well, where you need to start empowering that customer to start evaluating you. And that comes out quite strongly. The consumer is also learning. He'll want to know more than our generation or our previous generation for him to take a informed decision. That is what he's looking for. Now, could a 30-second advertisement or a full-page advertisement on a Sunday Times after spending millions of rupees provide him the information he needs to have to take that decision, is the question. So that is where I would think the digital channels comes into play, where you start providing the necessary information that will make him feel informed before a decision is made. So I guess that is where that part of the new generation come into play, and how are you going to be relevant to the new generation comes into play in that place, where you start empowering them and ensuring that they get the necessary information before he makes that decision. And that decision may not be a complicated decision. Even the soap you're going to use, whether he's going to use a Lux or a Lifebuoy or whatever, you might think that it's a very trivial decision. But for that new generation, it's a case that it is a life and death situation sometimes for him to decide what type of fat content, has it got some animal fat or something like that, before he takes that decision. So that I would think is the new thing in that how we are going to be relevant to that new consumer is going to be in that way. How do you empower knowledge is what I would think would like to add there. And Salia would like to add anything?
Yeah, sure, Charlie. I think in a bit of a lighter heart, brands nowadays are a little bit like a modern parent. You know, we are the generation that's scared of our parents as well as our kids, right? Disaster, yes. So I learn a lot from my 11-year-old daughter all the time. It's just, I think, as most of you mentioned, there is a transformation that happens even in marketing. So we need to be abreast. We need to know what's going on. That doesn't mean that we forget the fundamentals. I think the STP, the segmentation, targeting, positioning still remains. I mean, most of the ad platforms are built on that. If you go to Facebook, try to put an ad, first thing is, you know, what's the target audience, what's the message, and how are you going to put it out? You know, so those fundamentals are still there. And I think understanding where your customers are, where are they heading, be a little bit, a few steps ahead. And I think most of the time I've seen brands who are friendly, you know, who are friends, who they can relate to. I think modern loyalty is built on that. And you're spot on in terms of relevance and then being able to relate to it, as opposed to being this, you know, major conglomerate or major brand that I don't get. You know, we don't care about that now. I think most audiences don't give a, you know the rest of the word. So I think it's just being about relevant, and also as marketeers we need to understand. I think about 4 or 5 years ago when we were talking about, I think you talked about tracking and, you know, data and how to kind of look at ROI and that kind of stuff. Even within the community, we were talking about things like UTM codes, tracking codes, Google Analytics. It was like magic to them. So rather than going on that approach, we went on an education approach. You know, let's learn together. You know, not an agency brand kind of thing. Let's work together. Let's learn together. I think brands need to be the same, especially with their customers.
I think that's a fine note to wrap things up for the evening. We've got a very patient audience. I would like to think that was because they are very, very interested in working on what you were saying, and not because there's a power cut at home. Is there a question? Is there a question you want? Okay, right. Let's keep it very, very brief and very fast.
About being relevant. Is it only enough to be relevant when it comes to influencer marketing and using influencers to market your product or service? Because all what we see nowadays is brands, responsible brands using influencers just to market their products or services, but they don't really think about whether it's a responsible way of branding their product or service. So I just want to know about influencer marketing and how brands can be responsible.
I will, Salia, you want to quickly weigh in, and I'll ask Sajini to also.
As a brand, obviously you need to be responsible. I don't see a lot of brands, I mean, leave the influencers aside. In your YouTube channel, if your ad is appearing next to an ISIS propaganda video, will you be worried as a Sri Lankan brand? I have not seen anybody coming out and saying my brand doesn't or should be next to this, you know, in ad platform. But globally, for example, Unilever scaled down a lot of they even fired an ad agency for that. So they are responsible for what they portray to be and where they want to be. Similarly with influencers, there are tons and tons of, I think we love trend hopping, but it's just, we need to figure out whether it works for us and to our consumers. And, for example, if you go on some other channels, they just start marketing. And I think consumers are not stupid also. They know that, this is somebody just trying to market something to me. We don't want to be sold to. We want to be part of that decision-making process as consumers. So I think in terms of influencer marketing, first thing is figure out who the right influencer is for your right audience, and what does that influencer mean to your audience. Not just go and do what everybody else does. Don't go trend hopping. And just another small thing, there are the micro influencers and the nano influencers who are very important. For example, somebody who's connected to me, and if that person puts up something about something or a product, I will trust that more, as opposed to somebody who's representing 1,000 brands every day. So think about those as well and see what vehicles you can use in that medium.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question, because we are talking about beyond the bottom line, and the only way to kind of utilize influencers to bottom line activities is to give them a promotion code and see if they actually convert, right? And we don't do that with our influencers. We put them in the top of the funnel activities. We think they are going to bring us awareness. So one interesting thing, obviously I agree with most of what Salia said. You have to see if it works for your brand. But outside of that, an interesting concept would be to see if influencers actually help or hurt your brand. Because but we have mass influencers that do have a ton of, first of all, brands and other products on their hands. And then second of all, why do users follow influencers? It's a very glamorized version of their life. There was a time Instagram turned off the ability to see how many likes a person has on their Instagram post. That was because it was directly, that they found out in research that people feel depressed knowing that their colleagues are better celebrated for this very filtered version of life that they live. So in an effort to make the mental health of the users of the platform better, they turned off the number of likes you could see on the Instagram post. So when you put a brand on the hand of an influencer, I think it further disconnects a brand from what that means to a person and what it means to a celebrity. And I think we often just look at the numbers. Oh, this person has like 5 million followers, which like everyone's going to see my brand. But in what context? Every time we see an influencer or someone that's living like a grandiose life on social media, we don't feel good. We just kind of look at it and envy it. So that's just something I want to bring up, and I don't think a lot of people consider. Yeah.
So thanks to this panel, we haven't had to spend the evening in the dark going through Instagram and feeling depressed about it. So big round of applause for the panel, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks for being here. I will hand you over to Sanjay and the team.
Thank you very much for that interactive session and that insightful session. I would like to now call upon Mr. Sumudhu Tantirigoda, Director at the Association of International Marketing Graduates in Sri Lanka, to present the tokens of appreciation to the speakers of today's program. Mr. Tantirigoda will be handing over the token of appreciation to Mr. Charita Subasingha, President, Director Retail, John Keel's Group. Next, to Dr. Rohan Thathakorala, Country Head of Clue Track Labs for Sri Lanka, Maldives and Pakistan. Mr. Salia Vithana, Founder and CEO of Momentro and Infection. Ms. Sajini Janetti, Head of Content at Incube. Mr. Tarak Ranvala, Senior Deputy General Manager, Group Marketing, Deposit Mobilization and Digitalization at Sampant Bank PLC. And Mr. Shamindra Kulamannage, Co-Founder and Chief Editor of Echelon Media. Thank you, Mr. Tantirigoda. I now take the pleasure of inviting Mr. Roshan Kaluarachi, Treasurer of the Association of International Marketing Graduates in Sri Lanka, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Kasuni. Good evening to all of you. Distinguished speaker, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. As we come to the close of this professional series, a panel discussion on Beyond the Bottom Line, it is my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks to all who have helped us to make this event a success. First and foremost, I would like to thank the keynote speaker, Mr. Salia Vitana, founder, CEO, Infection and Momento, panelists, Ms. Sajini Jayanetti, Head of Content, InCube, Dr. Rohan Tatukorala, Country Head, Cluetrack Labs for Sri Lanka, Maldives and Pakistan, Mr. Charita Subasinghe, President Director, Retail, John Keel's Group, Mr. Tharaka Ranwala, Senior Deputy General Manager, Group Marketing, Deposit Mobilization and Digitalization Sampath Bank PLC, and the moderator, Mr. Shamindra Kulamanage, co-founder, Chief Editor, Echelon Media, for the insights shared with us on this timely topic. All of us here today were inspired by your great words. Thank you very much. My sincere gratitude goes out to all participants who are present today. We appreciate your time and effort to be here. Hope to see you soon once again in the future activities. I also extend my thanks to our sponsors, official telecommunications partner, Sri Lanka Telecom Mobitel, official banking partner, Sampath Bank PLC, corporate partners, Montreal Consultants, Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, APIT, Mobima, Ceylon Today, Serendip Mills and Emerging Media. We look forward to your continued support. Hosting a successful event involves a lot of people, and I thank the staff of JetWin Columbus 7 for their assistance. Board and staff of Association of International Marketing Graduates Sri Lanka, and to all those who helped us to make this event a success. I thank you once again, and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kaluarachi. Ladies and gentlemen, we now conclude today's program of Beyond the Bottom Line, the professional series bringing out marketers' perspective, organized by the Association of International Marketing Graduates in Sri Lanka, the AIMGSL. Thank you for being a part of this event, and also a very big thank you to our speakers for adding much value to the program today. Have a pleasant evening and stay safe.